Thank you, Mr. President and Senate colleagues. I want to take this opportunity to pay my respects to you and to thank you. It's been an honour to work with many of you over many years as we've sought to make this extraordinary country a better place in which to live and work. Obviously, this occasion lends itself to a little reflection, and I want to begin by saying that being a senator for the ACT has been an incredible experience. I've had the privilege of being part of an extraordinary community. It's the best case scenario as a politician, having a smart, engaged, politically savvy electorate, and I want to thank the people of the Australian Capital Territory for their support through 7 elections and through 19 years and 22 days. I believe that inside everybody is a desire to contribute to the greater good, and here in Canberra you see it formally through the work of members of the Australian Public Service and the Australian Defence Force. I want to take this opportunity to pay my respects to both public servants and members of the ADF. And in particular, last Saturday, a commemoration ceremony was held at the Australian War Memorial for all those who served and for those who lost their lives in recent conflicts. I give my heartfelt thanks to those who have served Australia and who continue to do so. I extend my sincerest condolences to the families that have lost their loved one. Their work is truly valued by the community and all of your parliamentary representatives. However, for those in the service of the public, job security and employment conditions become enmeshed in the shallower end of some of our profession's deliberations, and I'm sorry to see this occur. As public servants and serving defence personnel, you deserve better, and there remains important work to do to honour the principles informing the original undertakings relating to the maintaining of the purchasing power of your respective retirement incomes. Like all close communities in our beautiful country, Canberra's heart and soul is found within the people's volunteer efforts, their extracurricular activities, the unconditional caring, giving, the welcoming of new migrants and refugees, lifelong learning, philanthropy, creativity and sustaining our community through community and sporting clubs. It's often times of crisis that you see this generous heart, like what happened when people turned out to support the family of a woman murdered in her own home, and like the devastating fires of 2003. Thank you to all of you. You've inspired me every day to be the best I can be on your behalf, and you will continue to inspire me as I find other ways to contribute. Beyond the community warmth that we know so well, Canberra has another important dimension. It is the national capital. In this way, Canberrans are the collective custodians of our heart of our democracy. Our national institutions house our treasures, our records, our native flora, our art and our history. The Commonwealth of Australia, this Parliament, carries the responsibility of sustaining the principles that govern the relationship for planning between both the Commonwealth and the ACT. The interaction and collaboration between the now amply mature Territory Legislature and its ACT Planning Authority and the National Capital Authority is the key. It's not been without its dramas over the years, and there's been quite a few inquiries of the Joint Standing Committee on the National Capital and External Territories. And one such inquiry is that relating to Norfolk Island. I wish the government, the opposition and indeed the Parliament the very best in their united pursuit to create a more effective way to support the people of Norfolk Island, to manage and participate in their economy and society. And I wish the people of Norfolk Island the best. They deserve better than what they have. I'm really proud to see how this city has grown over the last 20 years, and I congratulate the ACT government for its part in Canberra's progress. And I acknowledge the role of successive territory governments that they've played in Canberra's development. I know the Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, will provide the inspired leadership we need right now as federal expenditure continues to contract. His commitment to economic growth, innovation and infrastructure will provide a critical counterbalance to the economy-wide impact of the cuts. He fills the very big shoes left by Katie Gallagher, who will soon take her place here in the Senate. On the nature of cutbacks, it would be remiss of me to remind people that Labor told you so. Many here in Canberra, including commentators, were beguiled by the fake budget crisis and disingenuous promises to limit cuts to voluntary redundancies. And I can't tell you how infuriating it is to have public sector jobs treated in such a cavalier way, notably relative to other regional jobs which have policymakers doing somersaults to save. All jobs are important, as is productivity. And productivity is most likely to grow on the back of technological innovation, like it's always done. So it's surprising that is it so surprising that the only logical conclusion that can be drawn by markets when programs supporting technological innovation and research and development are cut, that productivity is not in fact a priority? The last 20 years we've seen the pace of technological change escalate, impacting on how we live our lives and share our experiences. And navigating this policy terrain accompanying the many changes has been a challenge that I've relished. It remains one of the most complex and demanding and fast-moving areas of public policy. I decided that even before I was elected that I would apply myself to the task of ensuring through progressive policies that technological change was harnessed for progressive outcomes. In my first speech, I reflected on how information and how it's communicated is being a major determinant of power, and why universal access to the internet was required if we were serious about harnessing the next phase of economic expansion and social participation. For this reason, the National Broadband Network, as it was under Labor, stands out for me as the substantive achievement of our generation in Parliament, and certainly of the previous Labor government. It breaks my heart and offends my vision for this country to see the vision and now the plan so vandalised. I can say this with authority because I did much of the work exposing the underinvestment in Telstra's copper network during the Howard government in excruciating estimates hearings, back in the day when it wasn't unusual to sit till 4 a.m. I would race home for an hour's sleep, get up, get the children to school and do it all again. Unfortunately for Australia, the primary concern, that government's primary concern with comms and IT was maximising the return to shareholders through the sale of Telstra. As a nation, we lost ground, and I believe the fibre-to-the-premise wholesale NBN made this ground up. In contrast, the multi-technology mix model is a reversion. Why is the real NBN important? The internet is both an open platform of knowledge and the practical embodiment of distributed power, of democratic participation. The NBN is the pipe in which data flows, and if information is power, then now we could all have some, affordably, wherever we lived. It's my hope that my colleagues can find a path back to the real NBN, and I wish them well in this task. And yet I remember back in the late 90s when I was regaling my colleagues with ideas about the potential of the internet, I was told by one of them that the internet was indeed a fad, and that I would stuff up my career if I kept at it. Obviously I didn't listen, and you know who you are. One of my most shameless stunts was facilitated by Tom Worthington, the then president of the Australian Computer Society. In an elaborate exercise back in my first year as senator, we were the first people in the world to download a photo from a hot air balloon to the internet. That was no mean feat back in 1996. Mr. President, I believe in technology, I believe in the people that create it, and I celebrate the disruption that it causes. It can solve any problem, provided the problem is well understood and the ethical boundaries of any solution well defined. I've been on almost all of the comms and IT-related Senate inquiries over the last 20 years, except when I was Minister, of course, and most of the time governments are trying to solve problems that are not well understood with tools they know little about, and the ethical boundaries of any solution are either confused or absent. The responsibility for these things falls to the leadership group of any entity, be it Cabinet or in the private sector, the board. After all, good information is the precursor to making good decisions. Many of my friends know that Alan Turing is one person who inspires me greatly. This story is easier to tell now that a movie is finally being made that goes some way to giving an insight into this extraordinary person who made something new to solve an urgent and diabolical problem. I draw on his personal journey for understanding the enablers for profound technological progress. The tagline for that movie, called The Imitation Game, is, "Sometimes it is the people no one imagines anything of that do the things no one can imagine." And it reminds me that our responsibility is to provide every person, regardless of gender, race, religion, socioeconomic status, etc., with opportunity. How? Through education, and by removing discrimination in all its forms, and by encouraging creativity and original thought. If we can do this, then we have a society that can do anything. As an aside, I was really proud of the anti-racism campaign that former Attorney General Nicola Roxon and I launched when ministers. Time has shown how necessary it is to remain vigilant in the fight against racism. And just to bring it all back home in all of that, we've come a long way in 20 years. I bought my own PC and software in '96 and organised a humble dial-up service to be privately connected to my office here in Parliament House so I could build and update my own website. In those days, it wasn't expected that senators and members needed or used a computer. Social media did not exist, and most parliamentarians were not sure what the internet was. Later, I remember hosting colleagues for what I called a breakfast for technophobes and explaining that their emails were all kept on servers for years for evidentiary use if required. People were shocked, outraged and ultimately happy to continue using the system because the amenity outweighed the risk. And since then, there have been many issues where outrage is expressed and people are still happy to continue using the system because the amenity outweighs the risk. Take the internet filter, interactive gambling, the metadata debate as examples where the devil is definitely in the detail and in the political projection of the problem. The inability to explain detail and the opportunism in the safety/security narrative fuels distrust in the perceived hidden agenda, the unintended consequence, the unethical or sinister motivation, and finally, the lack of transparency and accountability. With the exception of Labor's promotion of the internet filter in government, which I note that I opposed, that after we opposed it in opposition when I was the Shadow Minister, invariably it's left to Labor in opposition to do the hard yards on the detail of the new laws, to expose the hidden agenda, to remove the unintended consequences and prevent the sinister motivation, and by creating transparency and accountability within the regime. It's Labor that comes up with the frustratingly complicated compromise. And it's Labor that often gets wedged between the political projection of the extremes in the process. But it's Labor that puts evidence, not emotion, at the forefront of its deliberations. And it's Labor that is prepared to compromise for the sake of progress and in the interests of the public and the nation. In short, I believe it's possible to design solutions to solve a well-understood problem within well-defined ethical boundaries. I know that privacy and security can coexist in an accountable and transparent framework. And while the absence of a simplistic, pithy, yes-no position on such issues can be disappointing for many Labor supporters, it's a process that honours the standard and heritage of a party that acts in the national interest, not political self-interest or self-preservation. This approach has arguably kept us out of office for longer and in office more briefly. But for better or worse, this is modern Labor's narrative in an environment of ever-diminishing returns on the credibility of our political system. I thought people were cynical back in 1996. Relative to now, they were downright joyous in their participation in our democracy. At this relatively low ebb in the level of confidence in our political system, it was often the excitement and anticipation that new migrants and refugees settling in Australia that reignited my enthusiasm for our democratic system. And one of the most memorable of many extraordinary experiences of my time in public office was being Minister for Multicultural Affairs. I met people every day whose life stories would both shock and inspire. I met people every day in the settlement services sector who devoted themselves to the well-being and happiness of others. I met the most motivated social and business entrepreneurs, from humble startups to some of our most successful global corporations, with migrants often starting from nothing. Australia boasts the most amazing list of self-made women and men. I want a big shout out to go to our multicultural ambassadors, appointed to that role to reflect their leadership and contribution. These people were active in their own right within their cities, regions and communities, promoting, celebrating and contributing to community harmony, to making Australia's multiculturalism the best in the world. And if any of you are listening, then I think we should definitely have a reunion in a few months' time. To everyone in the multicultural and settlement sector, I offer you my thanks and heartfelt respect for the role that you play. I thought I knew a thing or two about multiculturalism, but it wasn't long before I realised how much I didn't know. I learned so much and grew as a person because of the time I spent in this portfolio. I also want to acknowledge the work of the Australian Multicultural Council, led initially by Andrew Demetriou and then Ralph Sulio and Gail Kerr, and all the members who gave their time, experience and intellect. The launch of the multicultural policy was one of the proudest single moments of my time as Minister. There are many ways to promote inclusion in society, and I believe sport is one of the most effective. Sport, in the broadest definition of the term, is one of Australia's strongest egalitarian platforms. It's part of our ethos as a nation that if you have talent, discipline and a dream, you'll be able to achieve it. We perform exceptionally well internationally, and given our small population for a couple of reasons, and they're all interlinked. First, we have a diverse population. Our first Australians, our Pacific Islanders who now call Australia home, and our multicultural character mean we can draw on a multitude of strengths. And I'm not saying that just because I'm sitting next to one of the most highly acclaimed Aboriginal sports people in Australia, by the way. Having Senator Peris here in the Senate is a reflection on her strength of character and political substance. Senator Peris is a fantastic role model in a multitude of roles and an inspiring woman of substance, and I'm proud to say a friend. In general, our diverse population is a core strength, but secondly, it only comes into play because Australia has the broadest possible participation base at the heart of our system of sport. Participation unlocks the opportunity to explore one's sporting potential. The high achievers, the sports stars, then inspire the next generation, and in this way, the relationship between sustaining the participation base and supporting high performance is inextricable. They go together. Participation in sport also provides for far more than the sum of its parts. How do you place a dollar value on these things, just to name a few? Physical and mental health, social inclusion and a sense of belonging, teamwork, discipline, respect, community and national pride. Name another area of public policy that does all of these things so effectively, and then have a quick look at the total budget of sport relative to other areas of social expenditure. I know my colleagues know well of my passion for sport and protecting its budget. Never has so little budget done so much for so many, and I know you'll forgive me for that. For millions of Australians and their families, their hour or two of sport as participants and spectators is often the most fun hour or two of the week. It brings family and friends together, generations across families stay close through their team loyalty. And we only need to look across the desk at Senator Conroy to see the absolute personification of a football fanatic. And we know you scored a hat-trick at last week's game against the SBS All-Stars. My passion for sport means I'm prepared to defend it at all costs. I was tested on this when the Australian Crime Commission report was released when I was Minister. It gave me the opportunity to work with sports to harden their environments and protect their athletes and their game against new threats from new drugs and methodologies used for cheating, as well as the infiltration of criminal elements. There wasn't a bone in my body that was willing to sweep that aside or disassociate myself with the bad news. It was a turning point for sport, all right, one that, to their credit, the sports leadership fully subscribed to addressing. In unprecedented circumstances, I acted in the best interests of Australian sport. The ACC, the Australian Crime Commission, had described the problem, and the government would work with the sports to fix the problem on behalf of all the clean athletes, the ethical clubs and the parents who were deciding if and where their child would be playing sport. For all the pain and discomfort, I am proud that Australian sport remains the most accountable, cleanest, safest sporting environment in the world, and that other countries now look to Australia to improve their integrity regimes in the way that we have done. Before I leave the issue of sport, I've got one more thing I feel compelled to reflect upon. It won't surprise you. How is it that, despite women being 50% of our population, that the sport we play is so ridiculously unrepresented on our television sets? The answer is because editorial decisions are made that underinvest or ignore that content's potential, and the business case has never been tested in Australia. It's the exception that provides the evidence for their folly. Where the women's game is actively integrated with the men's, there's no problem at all with popularity or ratings or a business case. And a couple of examples are, of course, the Olympics, the Paralympics, the Commonwealth Games, the Australian Open. And a credit to Netball Australia and the WNBL as they've achieved remarkable results in the most challenging of circumstances. Keep up the fight for the right to be broadcast. It's pathetic and disgraceful that the urgent need to develop a sustainable business model around the broadcast of women's sport has been so ignored by broadcasters. It's not like it needs a subsidy, even though it probably does, just to keep going, but it needs belief. Belief that if you invest in it, promote it properly, advertise on it, sponsor it, it will fly. Just try it. Maybe then our female athletes can also earn what they deserve out of doing what they are best at. Mr. President, these are perennial issues that shouldn't be perennial. I wish my colleagues all the best in solving these problems, and I will continue to be passionate about them. In all my time in this place, I've tried to draw on my vision for Australia as a guide. One of the great benefits of being part of a large party like the Labor Party is that you have the ability to specialise in areas of policy. The corollary of that is you rely heavily on colleagues in areas where they are specialists and you are not, and you accept to be bound by the decisions of the caucus. And my vision has always focused on where we go next, where the jobs are going to come from, and how do we retain our humanity and sustain our environment as we leverage technology more and more and find ourselves drawn into new challenges. For Australia to have a fair, civil, healthy, engaged and educated society that values and leverages its cultural diversity to build social cohesion and global engagement. And this society needs to be supported by a diverse, digital-enabled economy that is growing sustainably through our investments in everything from education to innovation. It's a mouthful, but writing it down helps me focus. I believe in living a full life, and I've decided to pursue the things I'm passionate about in a different way. Nearly 20 years in the Senate has been long enough. I've had my ups and downs like most people in their careers. It's been far more creative than I ever would have thought possible, and I certainly came at it not wanting to fit what I saw as the standard mould at that time. I wanted to innovate, to try and do things differently, to see what the internet could do to help me engage with the people I represent. And technology has been at my side through this journey, and I want to acknowledge 3 people in this regard who at different points gave me confidence and inspiration to make this so. They're Tom Worthington, Jason Ives and the amazing Pia Wall. Personally, sport also plays a huge role in my life. It helps me outpace the black dog. I love how the sports groups in the Parliament have evolved, and many of my favourite personal moments have been playing footy, netball and rowing. I recall one particular rowing race, a Coxed 4, no less, back in 1998 at the Australian Masters Games here on Lake Burley-Griffin. Our crew, Senator Penny Wong, Catherine King MP, Kirsten Livermore MP, and myself, and Michelle O'Byrne was our cox. We managed a bronze medal that year. I can't remember what division it was, but it's a brilliant memory for us all. And so I'm moving on to new things. I'm excited, happy, relieved, and more than a little nostalgic to be leaving one of the best roles one could ever hope to have in a wonderful country like Australia. In my new role as Director of the NRMA, I'm excited to be part of a mutual association that has a deep history in representing motorists and road users. And my involvement in technology startups is something I always wanted to do. Holding public office is an illusion in some respects. All people see is the senator, the MP, but we are sustained by institutions, our party members, our colleagues, parliamentary services, of course our staff and our families. I'd like to say just a couple of words about each. I want to thank the staff of the Parliament, and in particular the Clerk of the Senate, Rosemary Lang, and the late Harry Evans before her, the staff of the committees, the library, the education office, the volunteers, the hospitality, everyone at Aussies, the wonderful security guards, tech support, got to know them well, sound and vision, tradies, Comcast staff, and the cleaners who clean our offices every day. And there are many more, but the list got too long. The current goings-on, the subject of an inquiry, will hopefully lead to improvements. I think you all deserve better, and thank you for your esprit de corps over the years, and thank you for helping me whenever I've needed it. To the ALP branch members here in Canberra, I feel like I'm part of a big family. We've campaigned together, attended a ridiculous number of meetings and conferences. You've held me to account and given me great ideas to move forward. Thank you. I'm a proud former union official, and I want to thank the ACT unions for their unwavering loyalty over so many years. In particular, I want to mention United Voice. We've worked together to promote fair pay and affordable high-quality childcare, as well as work together to stamp out the exploitation of vulnerable migrant workers. I'm proud to have worked with you and the other unions on important campaigns. To my parliamentary colleagues, I'm going to miss you. What an amazing group of people. It's just been incredible, and you do get to know people that are on committees, perhaps more than in any other way. And I've had a wonderful experience on all of the Senate committees. People have put up with me on those committees. Often endless meandering questions, but I can assure you I had a plan. I want to mention and thank and acknowledge John Faulkner. He was my mentor, whether he knew it or not. I'm lucky to have made so many friends in the party and, of course, across party lines. To soon-to-be Senator Katie Gallagher, I couldn't be happier or prouder that someone of your calibre and standing is replacing me here. It makes me feel great going, knowing that you will be here taking your place on behalf of Canberrans. To you and your family, and to David, Abby, Charlie and Evie, I wish you all the luck in the world. To my staff, and I've had a lot over the 20 years, but I particularly want to mention my staff, Kate Ward, to Meg Martin and Taryn Langdon. They're all more than staff, and the rest of my staff too, my current staff and staff in my ministerial office, staff going back literally 20 years. We just can't do our jobs without you. It's what allows us to do our work with confidence, to get from place to place, to understand the complex issues we're being presented with. Thank you so much for your work. In particular, I'd like to wish Taryn and Ash the best for their birth of their first child, due in a mere 3 days. Taryn, you've been incredible in the latter stages of your pregnancy, helping wind things up in the office. Thank you so much. To my family keeps me grounded. They are so wonderful in ensuring that not only, I keep my head firmly in the right place, but they've reminded me from time to time about what's real and what's not. And my late grandmother, Myra Barrett, who's now passed, used to ring me and tell me off if she saw me interjecting in question time. And it was like, oh, I didn't mean to. I was provoked. I was provoked, Grandma. To my mother Helen and father Peter and stepmother Maureen, to my brother Charles and his wife Bronwyn, my nephews Max and Jack. And I'd like to also mention my late sister Jane's children, Olivia, Sophie and James. To each of you, thank you for your unrelenting support in quite extenuating circumstances when, the wheels fall off my system. You're always there to help me to pick up the pieces. But most of all to my children, to Alexandra, Annabelle and Ben, and my stepsons Robert and Matthew. Thank you for your understanding about what I've needed and wanted to do in public life. You're all remarkable young people. I would not have been able to do this without your understanding and support. It's been an incredible journey, and today I say goodbye to the Senate, but I do so happily, inspired and feeling extremely confident that the challenges before you will not only be fulfilled, but to do it in a way that continues to inspire other people, the next generation of young people who look to our democracy and seek that inspiration. Good luck to all of you, and thank you so much.